The next item on the agenda is a decision item on the REGDOC-2.13.1 safeguards and nuclear material accountancy as outlined in CMD 17 M62 and M62.A and B. I understand that Ms. Eplin-Massey will start us off. Okay. So, Dr. Demeter will be with us in a second. I want to make sure everybody is here for the decision. Okay, we can proceed. Over to you. Go ahead.
Merci. Bonjour, Monsieur le Président, membres de la Commission. My name is Kathleen Heppel-Massey, Director General of the Directorate of Security and Safeguards, and with me today are Ms. Karen Owen-Whitred, Director of the Regulatory Framework Division, Mr. David Morose, Director of the International Safeguard Division, along with Ms. Jennifer Sample, Senior Safeguard Accountancy Advisor, Ms. Vibha Bal, Regulatory Framework Officer, Mr. Patrick Burton, Senior Safeguard Advisor, and other CNSC staff are available to support and answer any questions you may have today. Nuclear safeguards form part of one of the 14 safety and control areas. While the safeguards and non-proliferation safety and control area is often considered by the Commission as it reviews licensees and reports, it does not often come before the Commission in isolation. Therefore, as part of presenting to you this document for your decision today, CNSC staff will provide some background information on the topic of nuclear safeguards as part of today's presentation. I will now turn the presentation to Ms. Karen Owen-Whitred, Director of the Regulatory Framework Division.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Karen Owen-Whitred. We are here today to request Commission approval of REGDOC-2.13.1, Safeguards and Nuclear Material Accountancy. REGDOC-2.13.1 sets out requirements and guidance for safeguards programs for relevant licensees and applicants. If approved by the Commission, REGDOC-2.13.1 will be an important addition to the CNSC's regulatory framework. The document codifies existing practices with respect to safeguards and nuclear material accountancy. It introduces requirements based on type of material, facility, and activity, and it provides a comprehensive resource for safeguards and nuclear material accountancy-related requirements and guidance. I will now outline today's presentation. I will briefly review the role of regulatory documents and situate REGDOC-2.13.1 within the CNSC's regulatory document framework. Next, we will go over some of the details of REGDOC-2.13.1. Specifically, we will provide the background, the objectives, and the process and results of public consultation, including the key comments from public consultation and how CNSC staff address them. We will provide a brief explanation of how this regulatory document, if approved, would be implemented. Finally, we will finish our presentation with CNSC staff's recommendations and conclusions. To enhance accessibility of our regulatory expectations, the CNSC structures our regulatory documents according to the framework shown here. This slide shows where REGDOC-2.13.1 fits within the CNSC's broader document framework. It is situated within Category 2, Safety and Control Areas, in the Safeguards and Non-Proliferation series. I will now turn the presentation over to Mr. David Morose, Director of the International Safeguards Division.
Thank you. David Morose, Director of International Safeguards at the CNSC, for the record. As Ms. Heppel-Massey has mentioned, we will provide some background on safeguards. Safeguards can be defined as a system of measures that include the reporting of nuclear material inventories and flows, otherwise known as nuclear material accountancy, and the verification of that material through inspections. Additional measures include the provision and verification of other complementary information on nuclear activities. Ultimately, the purpose of safeguards is to provide the international community with confidence that nuclear material is not being diverted to the manufacture of nuclear weapons, and that all nuclear activities in a state are peaceful in nature. The definition of nuclear material for the purposes of safeguards is provided through the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which requires safeguards on all source and special fissionable material. These terms are defined in the statute of the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA. The applicability of safeguards is further clarified in the Safeguards Agreement between Canada and the IAEA in connection with the treaty. Based on the definition, nuclear material subject to reporting includes the list that you see on the slide before you. But more simply put, safeguards apply to all uranium and thorium, excluding ores, and plutonium-239. Canada has accepted international safeguards for the following reasons. The first reason, Canada committed more than 4 decades ago to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. The treaty requires non-nuclear weapon states parties such as Canada to conclude and implement a safeguards agreement which applies to all nuclear material in the state. Turning to the second reason, Canadian foreign and security policy place an emphasis on preventing the spread of nuclear weapons. International safeguards play an important role in providing confidence that nuclear programs elsewhere are peaceful in nature. Confidence is reciprocal. Finally, the third reason, as the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons is nearly universal, the acceptance of international safeguards has become a condition of supply for international nuclear trade. States party to the treaty are committed to ensure that nuclear material shipments remain subject to IAEA safeguards on receipt. The ultimate goal is to support the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons as envisioned in the treaty. The Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons came into force in 1970. It established the 5 states that had already developed nuclear weapons as nuclear weapon states, and all other states as non-nuclear weapon states under the treaty. The treaty was developed based on 3 objectives. First, to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons as embodied in the commitments of states not to develop or transfer nuclear weapons and to accept safeguards on nuclear materials. Second, to promote international cooperation in the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, ensuring that states that forego nuclear weapons would still have access to the benefits of nuclear energy and applications. And third, to further the goal of nuclear disarmament by committing nuclear weapon states to pursue negotiations in good faith towards effective measures for disarmament. The treaty is the most universal of international treaties, with nearly all states in the world as parties. The few exceptions are India, Pakistan, Israel, and South Sudan. North Korea, once a party to the treaty, has declared its withdrawal. The Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons requires each non-nuclear weapon state to conclude a safeguards agreement between the state and the IAEA in connection with the treaty. This safeguards agreement is sometimes also called a comprehensive safeguards agreement because it requires the declaration of all nuclear material in the state. Each non-nuclear weapon state safeguards agreement is based on IAEA document INFCIRC 153, the cover of which is reproduced here on the slide. As required by the treaty, Canada concluded a safeguards agreement with the International Atomic Energy Agency in 1972. Under the safeguards agreement, Canada agrees to report nuclear material inventories and flows to the IAEA and to accept verification of those declarations by the IAEA. Under the safeguards agreement, there are some key state obligations designed to ensure that nuclear material is declared and can be verified. These aspects of the agreement are highlighted in green on the left side of this slide. At the same time, the treaty ensures that states may develop nuclear energy for peaceful use. As such, the safeguards agreement also places obligations on the IAEA to work with the state, to protect commercial and industrial secrets, and to avoid undue interference with peaceful nuclear activities. It also requires that the IAEA remain focused on nuclear material from which weapons could be readily made. These aspects of the agreement are highlighted in blue on the right side of this slide. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, it became clear that the Safeguards Agreement was not sufficient to address emerging non-proliferation cases. At the end of the 1991 Gulf War, it was discovered that Iraq had a clandestine, undeclared nuclear program operating alongside its declared nuclear program. Likewise, this was also a period during which questions about North Korea's nuclear program first started to arise. Both of these countries had safeguards agreements with the IAEA in place, and agency inspectors were visiting these countries to verify declared nuclear material. However, inspectors did not have the tools required to look beyond declared nuclear materials to find undeclared material and activities. The IAEA struck a committee in 1992, and by 1997, this committee had produced a document called the Additional Protocol. The protocol was, as its name suggests, additional to the Safeguards Agreement, and it introduced new tools and access rights for IAEA inspectors to pursue questions about undeclared nuclear material and activities. Canada brought its additional protocol into force in 2000. Unlike the Safeguards Agreement, the additional protocol is not currently considered a requirement under the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. However, Canada takes the position that a Safeguards Agreement and an additional protocol should together form the safeguards standard under the treaty. As noted, the additional protocol provides the IAEA with new tools to detect undeclared nuclear material and activities. These new tools include more comprehensive declarations from the state that go beyond declarations of nuclear material to information on every building on every nuclear site, uranium mining and milling activities, nuclear fuel cycle-related research and development, specified nuclear-related manufacturing activities, and imports and exports of nuclear goods. In addition to requiring more declarations, the additional protocol also includes additional verification tools through complementary access. Complementary accesses are essentially inspections that can be used by the IAEA to verify the additional information provided and to take environmental samples to ensure the absence of nuclear material. To increase their effectiveness, complementary accesses can be performed on short notice. The Safeguards Agreement and the additional protocol together contain Canada's international obligations to the IAEA for safeguards purposes. Together, these two agreements are implemented through the Safeguards Regulatory Framework. This framework has an international component and a domestic component. The international component is what we have just been talking about. It includes our agreements with the international community, whether they are multilateral, such as the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, or bilateral, such as the Safeguards Agreement and Additional Protocol. Because the agreements are international, they are negotiated by Global Affairs Canada, although the CNSC provides policy advice. The CNSC is also mandated with the implementation of the Safeguards Agreement and Additional Protocol. The linkage between the international and domestic context is provided by Section 9 of the Nuclear Safety and Control Act. Specifically, subparagraph 9A3 specifies the object of the Commission with respect to achieving conformity with international obligations related to nuclear material and activities. From the Act, the obligations associated with safeguards flow through the domestic regulatory framework, including the regulations, licenses, and license conditions handbooks, to the regulatory document. The safeguard system seen on this slide is a direct result of the safeguards regulatory framework depicted on the previous slide. The Nuclear Safety and Control Act makes the CNSC the state regulatory authority for safeguards in Canada, which means that the CNSC is the organization that ensures that Canada complies with the obligations to the IAEA under the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement and Additional Protocol. This includes providing state reports and other required information to the IAEA and providing the IAEA access for verification. The CNSC is also mandated to provide assurance that licensees comply with their safeguards obligations, specifically provision of nuclear material accountancy data, design, operational, and other information as required, access for IAEA inspections, and support for safeguards equipment. While the CNSC regulates safeguards domestically, the IAEA provides assurance that states are meeting their safeguards obligations. With this background in mind, I will now turn to REGDOC-2.13.1, which is before the Commission today. The objective of REGDOC-2.13.1 is to establish in a single document the information, access, and support licensees must provide to facilitate Canadian compliance with the Safeguards Agreement and additional protocol. To do so, REGDOC-2.13.1 does the following. It ensures the Canadian domestic regulatory framework is aligned with Canada's commitments to the IAEA. It provides licensees with a clear and comprehensive set of safeguards requirements. It provides information to license applicants and the public on the safeguards framework in Canada. And it provides a tool for CNSC staff to assess licensee compliance. REGDOC-2.13.1 consolidates requirements and guidance from License Conditions Handbooks, as well as from RD-336, Accounting and Reporting of Nuclear Material, and GD-336, Guidance for Accounting and Reporting of Nuclear Material, both of which were published in 2010. While RD-336 and GD-336 focused on nuclear material accountancy reporting, REGDOC-2.13.1 is more comprehensive. The consolidated requirements and guidance include the provision of access to the IAEA for verification, the provision of support for safeguards equipment and seals, nuclear material accountancy and reporting, and the provision of design, operational, and other information as specified in the additional protocol. Although consolidated in REGDOC-2.13.1, these requirements are not new and are already incorporated into the safeguards programs of licensees. REGDOC-2.13.1 also includes a requirement on the retention period for safeguards records. If approved, REGDOC-2.13.1 will supersede RD-336 and GD-336. This slide sets out who REGDOC-2.13.1 applies to. It applies to licensees who possess nuclear material. It applies to operators of uranium and thorium mines. It applies to licensees who carry out nuclear fuel cycle related research and development activities. And finally, it applies to licensees who carry out specified types of nuclear related manufacturing. REGDOC-2.13.1 defines groups of nuclear material and categories of licensees to which the document's requirements and guidance apply. I will define these groups and categories here as they will come up later in the discussion. In terms of nuclear material, Group 1 material is material that has reached a level of purity sufficient for fuel fabrication or enrichment. Group 1A material is the subgroup of this material that is subject to full scope safeguards, which includes verification by the IAEA. Most nuclear material that is in the fuel cycle is Group 1A. Group 1B material is material that has been temporarily exempted by the IAEA from safeguards, for instance, because it is in non-nuclear use. For example, depleted uranium used as shielding. Group 2 material is nuclear material that has not yet reached the level of purity of Group 1 material. This material, which includes uranium ore concentrates in Canada, must be reported to the IAEA, but is not subject to verification. REGDOC-2.13.1 also defines categories of licensees according to the quantity and type of nuclear material they may have. Facilities for the purposes of safeguards includes reactors, uranium processing facilities, and waste management facilities. Facilities have large amounts of nuclear material and have the greatest reporting requirements of the three categories. Locations outside facilities or lofts tend to be universities or research organizations. Lofts do not have enough nuclear material to be considered a facility, but will still be subject to verification by the IAEA, although the frequency of inspection will depend on the inventory held. Finally, other licensees may hold only exempted nuclear material. In such cases, the licensee will be neither a facility nor a location outside a facility or loft. All requirements and guidance contained within REGDOC-2.13.1 are based on the groups of material and the categories of licensees so defined. I will now turn the presentation to Ms. Jennifer Sample to discuss the consultation activities associated with the REGDOC.
Thank you. I'm Jennifer Sample, Senior Safeguards Accountancy Advisor for the record. This slide presents the key public consultation activities that were conducted for REGDOC-2.13.1. The first activity was a 60-day public consultation period on the draft regulatory document. The CNSC received 77 comments from 9 respondents, all from industry during this period. Following the consultation period, submissions from respondents were posted for 3 weeks on the CNSC website. This garnered an additional 15 comments from 3 respondents, which included 1 industry organization and 2 non-government organizations. As a result of the comments received, the CNSC held a workshop on October 4th, 2017, to discuss the draft regulatory document and present how the document was modified to address the comments received. The workshop was attended by 37 external participants, including both industry and non-government organizations. In the following slides, the feedback from stakeholders will be described in more detail. As outlined on this slide, there were 4 key concerns raised during the public consultation period. These concerns related to the use of the Nuclear Materials Accountancy Reporting e-business system, the installation of safeguards equipment, the accommodation of complementary access requests, and the generation of a list of inventory items. The following slides will focus on these specific concerns. The Nuclear Materials Accountancy Reporting e-business system is a secure website that licensees will be required to use to electronically upload all nuclear material accountancy reports to the CNSC. Launched in the fall of 2013, the system contributes to the quality of the CNSC's safeguards data by validating upload reports and automating data entry. Licensees can securely access the Nuclear Materials Accountancy Reporting e-business system using Government of Canada issued credentials, known as GC Key. All uploaded reports are automatically saved in the CNSC's electronic records repository. Additionally, through the use of machine-readable forms, the data from the reports that contain information on nuclear material inventory and movement are automatically input into the safeguards database and are used to generate the state reports that are submitted to the IAEA. The remaining reports are received on non-machine readable forms, since the data they contain is neither entered into the database nor utilized to generate the state reports. The first concern raised by licensees was that mandatory use of the Nuclear Materials Accountancy Reporting e-business system would necessitate replacing current inventory tracking software. The second concern raised by licensees was that REGDOC-2.13.1 did not allow for PDF file types for some of the non-machine readable forms. Lastly, licensees raised concerns regarding use of personal GC Key credentials to submit company information. In response to licensees' concerns, CNSC staff clarified that the Nuclear Materials Accountancy Reporting e-business system does not replace existing licensee tools for inventory tracking. It is simply a secure website that licensees can use to upload reports produced by their inventory tracking software. Based on licensee comments regarding file types, REGDOC-2.13.1 has been modified to reflect that the system will accept PDF file types for all reports that are submitted on non-machine readable forms. Through the stakeholder workshop, CNSC staff communicated that when using GC Key credentials, no personally identifiable information is exchanged during the authentication process. Licensees were informed that GC Key is strictly a Government of Canada service that issues unique credentials to individuals that may be used to access Government of Canada services online. Licensees were also advised that individuals have the liberty to create multiple GC Keys and can therefore create one for personal use and another for business use should they wish. Irrespective of GC Key use, licensees were assured that they maintain the authority to manage access to the nuclear materials accountancy reporting e-business system for their staff via the submission of a management-approved access request form and written consent to subsequently close an account. The IAEA utilizes various types of equipment, such as radiation detectors and cameras, to assist in the verification of nuclear material inventories and movement. Licensees raised concerns regarding who would be responsible for bearing the costs of installing IAEA equipment. To address this concern, text was added to the guidance in Section 5 to state that requests to install safeguards equipment at the licensed site will be preceded by consultation with licensees. This was further reinforced by the inclusion in the guidance section a passage from the safeguards agreement that specifies that under certain circumstances, and if agreed in advance, the IEA will reimburse licensees specific expenses incurred to implement safeguards. Complementary access is a type of activity that the IAEA is permitted to perform in states with an additional protocol in place. One of the objectives of this type of activity is for IAEA inspectors to confirm the absence of undeclared nuclear material and activities. Under certain circumstances, if the IAEA is already on site, a complementary access may be requested by the IAEA with as little as 2 hours' notice. The primary concern licensees had was regarding 2 hours' notice for complementary access at sites which house multiple licensees. For example, one current safeguarded site houses 3 licensees, including the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, Bruce Power, and Ontario Power Generation. Licensees noted the difficulty disseminating the notification received to the appropriate parties under such circumstances. It was noted that it was conceivable that one licensee may not even be aware that the IAEA was on site for an activity at another licensee's facility. As per the additional protocol, complementary access must be granted under certain circumstances. In order to address this concern raised by licensees and to ensure that licensees have sufficient time to support complementary access requests, text was added to the guidance in Section 6.3 to indicate that the CNSC would notify all licensees on a given site whenever the IAEA was present at that site for another scheduled activity. A list of inventory items is an itemized list of the nuclear material on site. It forms the basis of subsequent verification activities done by either the IAEA or the CNSC. Depending on the inspection activity, either all or a subset of the nuclear material on the list of inventory items will be verified. Licensees raised concerns regarding the requirement for a list of inventory items to be produced for all nuclear material on site upon request. Specifically of concern was the level of effort required by some licensees to produce, on short notice, a complete list of inventory items for an operating facility. For example, a uranium processing facility with in-process inventories. Secondly, licensees raised concerns regarding the challenges of generating a list of inventory items and performing an inventory verification for exempted material, known as Group 1B material. This would be an issue they would find as part of the annual inventory taking. To address the licensee's first concern regarding inventory taking for in-process materials, the guidance in Section 8.1.4 was modified to specify that depending on the nature of the CNSC and/or IAEA inspection activity, the list of inventory items may cover all or a subset of the nuclear material on site. For example, the CNSC would expect a licensee to provide a complete list of inventory items as a result of an annual inventory taking scheduled in advance. For a uranium processing facility, this would typically coincide with a shutdown period in order to alleviate the challenges resulting from in-process inventories. During other types of inspections, the licensee would only need to provide a list of inventory items for the portion of the nuclear material being specifically verified during that particular activity. In such cases, the licensee would be informed in advance of the scope of the inspection so that the list of inventory items could be prepared accordingly. As per RD 336, Accounting and Reporting of Nuclear Material, the requirements to produce a list of inventory items for exempted material is an existing requirement. Through the inclusion of exempted material in the annual inventory taking, the CNSC is able to maintain up-to-date information regarding the location of exempted material in Canada. This information is subsequently used in the annual additional protocol update submitted to the IAEA. To address the licensee's second concern regarding the production of a list of inventory items for exempted material, the guidance in Section 7.3 was modified to specify that in 2 specific cases, exempted material may be accounted for by using source documents such as commercial or shipping documents. These specific cases relate to inaccessible exempted material, such as material stored in sealed containers, and exempted material that has been temporarily transferred at the time of an annual inventory taking, such as a shipping container containing depleted uranium shielding. This concludes the measures taken to address the 4 key concerns raised during the public consultation period. With respect to implementation, if REGDOC-2.13.1 is approved, the next steps are to publish the document in early 2018 and make it available to licensees and stakeholders. For Class 1 nuclear facilities and uranium mines and mills, to incorporate REGDOC-2.13.1 into the license condition handbooks for each licensee, and for nuclear substances and radiation devices licensees to implement REGDOC-2.13.1 under the existing safeguards license condition. I will now turn it back over to my colleague, Karen Owen-Whitred.
To conclude, REGDOC-2.13.1, Safeguards and Nuclear Material Accountancy, enhances the existing regulatory framework by formalizing and codifying existing safeguards practices, ensuring that the domestic regulatory framework for safeguards aligns with Canada's commitments to the IAEA in this area, providing licensees with a clear set of safeguards requirements, providing information to the broader public regarding Canada's safeguards framework, and providing a tool for CNSC staff to assess licensee compliance for this safety and control area. If approved, this regulatory document is expected to be published in early 2018. Based on these conclusions, CNSC staff recommends that the Commission approve this regulatory document. We thank you for your attention and remain available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you.